Welcome everyone to the Change Starts Here podcast. I'm your host, Dustin Odham. In today's episode, we have a unique episode in that it's me talking to three high school students. And before you tune out, I'll just tell you, it was one of the more interesting conversations I've had on the podcast. So the three students are Jenaya Wilder, Mary Katherine Archer, and Jorge Sanchez. They are beyond their years when it comes to wisdom and talent and future. So one, they're just really cool to talk to. Two, the insight they gave me, but they'll give us is really impressive. We dove into what are the biggest challenges facing teenagers, and particularly students at the high school level and even middle school. And we dove into some of their ideas on how to fix those. We talked about how do we fight student apathy, which is something that I know every educator and parent thinks through, at least at some point in their life or career. We also talk about the importance of leadership development in schools, even as young as kindergarten and as high as high school, and how that's helped them. The part that I was most surprised by at the end was when I just asked them, what's their best leadership advice? The wisdom that came out of all three of their mouths is just super impressive. And honestly, it hit me at a place where I needed it. And so as I just think about things that I struggle with personally, or a time in my life that I'm going through, their wisdom was really, really helpful to me. I know it may sound crazy to some folks listening, but I know that you all don't know who these random high school students are to you, but Jenaya Wilder, Mary Katherine Archer, and Jorge Sanchez, I believe will be household names in whatever community they continue to serve and grow up in, because they are just super impressive. So do not turn out. I would say lean in, enjoy this conversation, because it was really, really enjoyable. So again, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. We need your continued support. Thank you so much for listening, and enjoy. Team, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Good to be here.
All right, so Jenaya, we're going to go on you first. The question that we ask everybody is, who are you and what do you love about what you do? So I want to know, who are you and what do you love about being a high school student?
Who am I? I feel like that can be kind of a tricky question to answer. I think I'm a kind-hearted person. I think I'm a realist, and I think I'm also someone who generally cares about, lots of things, people, places and environments and that kind of thing. So what do I like about being a high schooler? Being a high schooler, I feel like there are a lot of ups and downs, a bit of a roller coaster altogether. But I think the thing that I like most about being a high schooler is that there are so many new options and new routes to take, different things to explore that you can't necessarily do in the schools below high school.
Yep.
So I think that the opportunity is probably the most the biggest thing that I love about being a high schooler.
That's awesome. How about you, Mary Katherine?
If you were to ask me who I was, I think I would say that I'm inquisitive. I think that I would say that I'm analytical, but I also really care about the human, about the emotional side of everything. Yep. I think I have a really strong faith that roots me in a lot of the decisions that I make. And then what I love about being a high school student, oh my goodness, I think as a high school student or as a young person in general, there's a lot of potential with everything. Like you're not yet centered on a degree, or you're not yet in a job where people expect you to do a certain thing. So kind of like Jenaya said, you can do everything and just explore it all and find your passions and your gifts. And so I think the potential that comes with being young and being at this point in our lives is what I love about being a high school student.
That's awesome. How about you, Jorge?
I think something that people, and I even notice if I had to describe myself, is that first and foremost, I am a very detail-oriented person. Not in a bad way, but I'm more of, when I think bigger picture, I also like looking at, okay, how are we going to get there? And what is the end goal before we begin anything? I think another thing too that I realized about myself and that I like telling people is that I'm passionate about the projects that I participate in. I'm really into getting students prepared for leadership positions, for life after high school. I'm very passionate about family consumer science education and even financial literacy, things that are affecting our students day to day. Something I like about being a high schooler, I'd have to say, honestly, like Mary, Katherine, and Jenaya have said, is the flexibility of really discovering what your passions and what you love are. Being a high schooler, depending on where you go, you have the flexibility of going into different electives. You get to discover, I personally have discovered I have a love for science, but also for economics and politics. And I've had an opportunity to really experience everything. And I don't think I'd be able to do that if I wasn't going to high school, to put it like that.
That's great. Jenaya, you said earlier when you started thinking about high school, you said high school's full of ups and downs. And I think that resonates with anybody who's in high school or been through high school. Like for me, 20 some odd years ago, it was definitely full of ups and downs. I'm curious right now, what are the biggest challenges you, and more importantly, your fellow classmates are really struggling with right now? Just curious what, the climate's like for you guys. Jenaya, I'll let you go first, and then I'll go reverse order. I'll go back to Jorge and then Mary Katherine.
I think one of the biggest challenges with high school is all the different little cliques and like different separations. I think it's kind of like all of these little cliques form pretty early on, even before high school. So you go into high school and maybe there's a little bit shifting around, new students, that kind of thing. But generally, it pretty much stays how it is. So either you're with those big groups of people or you're not. And I think that is probably the biggest challenge for me, at least in high school, is because, I'm not someone who really fits into a certain like big clique or anything like that, which I honestly don't mind. But it does create a bit of a rift between everyone in your class. And I think without that, we'd all be a bit happier.
Absolutely. Jorge, I think you and I've talked about that particular issue in the past, but I'm curious, does that resonate with you, or are there other challenges that you notice that your classmates are facing right now?
I think really it's just finding time to balance everything. Like there's so much that we as high schoolers want to do, that we want to experience, having social time, but then we're also getting bombarded by tons of worksheets upon worksheet and packets, and then Zooms. And if we're involved in CTSOs or extracurriculars, that's also taking up some of our time. I think the biggest challenge for me and my peers is managing that limited 24 hours that we have to do things.
Mary Katherine, how about you?
I absolutely agree with both Jorge and Jenaya. I think that the first semester, I'll just say from my perspective, I had a really bad issue with time management. I was playing volleyball and doing school and doing a whole bunch of things. So I definitely relate to Jorge, but also to Jenaya. And then especially as a senior, now those cliques are kind of falling and we're having to figure out who we are, what we actually like, and not just the things we kind of meld into to like fit into high school. So I think that's another big struggle too.
So go into that a little bit. And I'm trying to think, so the people who are listening to this podcast are mostly educational leaders, right? Who are trying to figure out how do we create better district, school, community environments for our students to thrive now and into the future. And so to kind of tackle both of those, one, time management, and two, the kind of clique challenge that all of you face and all of us have faced in high school. Mary Katherine, I'll start with you. What ideas do you have, or what ideas have you seen implemented that have helped you tackle, the time management and maybe your students tackling the clique challenge?
With time management, I think that my school does a really good job of giving us blocks of free time, whether that be to plan or to study or to do whatever. But like a block at the beginning of the day and a block at the end of the day is something that has really helped me, even if it's simply just saying, okay, here's what I have to do today and here's the time that I'm going to do it. Just to have that plan going into my 8-hour school day has been extremely helpful. And then with the cliques, I think that students, especially going into high school, need to understand or need help understanding that just because I like something doesn't mean that's my identity. Like just because I like theater doesn't mean that I'm a theater kid, right? Or just because I'm really smart doesn't mean that I'm the studious kid who doesn't do anything else. I think students need to understand that it's high school and you can be anything. That's life. You can be and do whatever. So educators would be great. I think that school districts would be better if we understood that more.
So how, I mean, again, I don't think you need to solve all the problems, but to keep going there, I think that is such a pain point for everyone. What ideas would you have for incoming freshmen, or for, just current freshmen through seniors, to try to tease that out so that people can see you as more than just that one passion you have, or those one or two things that you're constantly recognized for being great at?
Well, when I was in ninth grade, I had a teacher who the first thing they did in our class was they said, get out a piece of paper and write your story. And so maybe gave us like 20, 30 minutes to just write everything about ourselves, our name, our siblings, our favorite color, the things that we love to do, our passions. And we were able to deliver that to the class. So I think it started off like just opening ourselves up. So no matter what people had seen us do in the past, or no matter what we were known for, we got to present every part of us to our like our fellow students. And so I think it just felt really releasing for me. I think because in the past I was someone who was like the studious kid, but I think doing that allowed me to not have to live up to expectations to my fellow students. I think it allowed me to really just release and do what I felt like doing, or do what I felt called to do in high school.
That's great. Jenaya, I mean, I called on you first to talk about the cliques. So have you put some thought into one of the ways that we could, schools can attack that issue and make them better?
I think that, the whole forming of cliques and this kind of thing is just that people think, oh, well, I need someone that I have to sit with at lunch, or I need someone that's exactly like me. And they migrate to each other, and then they just kind of stay in that. And some people, it's so ingrained and it's so important that they kind of lose themselves in it. And I think a good reminder, hey, yeah, having friends is important, and yeah, these people are great, but they don't define your identity. This clique isn't just who you are. And I think showing kids that it's okay to not identify with this whole group, to be yourself, to be an individual, to strike out on your own. And maybe you don't have 20 friends you could sit with at lunch, but maybe you see yourself and know yourself better. You can see past high school, because people always say you're considered a popular kid in high school now, it doesn't mean it's very important once you leave. And I think just giving the kids the opportunity to find themselves and maybe find some interests that they would necessarily look into if they were with all of these huge cliques and friends and that kind of thing.
That's great. Jorge, do you want to add anything to solutions for time management or breaking down of cliques?
Yeah, I mean, really for time management, what I do is I keep track of all the assignments that I have. I recently, because I have some deadlines coming up from now to March, I've started a calendar on my phone, and I just put in, okay, I need to get this social media post up this day for my organization. This needs to get done this day. I need to send out this email this day. And for school, what I do is I have this app called School Assistant. It's I don't know, it's made by an indie developer, but you get to put in your assignments, put a due date, and it populates in a general list, and you can just swipe it, and it completes the assignment and things like that. So that's what's helped me. And I have a 4-hour bus ride, 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours coming home. So it's already hard enough to kind of balance everything out. I just like to take a step back, breathe in, and realize, okay, have some patience with yourself, look at the bigger picture, and see what's going on. See, oh, this homework's easier than this one. Let me do this one first. This homework's harder. Let me leave it to last. It really is just what works for you, and there's not one set formula for everyone. And to educators, please, 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 please have patience with us. If we ask you for extra time, 9 out of 10, it's because we need it, and not because we forgot to do it or something like that. It's just we already have your class and possibly 7, 8 others if we're doing virtual school at that time.
Yep. I remember us talking about when you're experiencing that. I'm laughing because I'm thinking like, man, you got 2 hour bus ride in the morning, a 2 hour ride afternoon. Like, you should be able to solve everything in that time, right? All kidding aside, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. All kidding aside, though, one of my first thoughts was I think Jorge needs to go into a business for high school students, helping them improve their time management. You're talking about this other app. You might need to either hop into that app or offer your consulting services to help other students access that app at the highest level possible. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, see, I actually, when I get an opportunity to talk to my friends and people through conferences, I tell them, hey, look, I know this app. I don't make it. I'm not sponsored by them. I really love it because here, I even have it on my phone. It gives you like a little widget. You know how like iOS 15, they have the little widget. It literally tells me, okay, you have this many assignments left. You have these tests coming up. And I found a similar one like that for my medication too, because I'm extremely forgetful about that. And sometimes it really just comes down to if you're forgetful, that's going to be the majority of the time. Like you're going to be on TikTok, you'll forget you'll have homework, you'll be like, oh, ha, 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 oh, I have homework.
Yep.
And it'll be like 11 at night, and then your assignment's due at 11:59. So
That's great. So I was on a call to start my day with high school principal in kind of the Midwest United States. And we were just talking about some of the challenges that they face. And one of the challenges that got brought up was a struggle with apathy of students. Like there's a general feel from the staff that students just aren't caring or aren't as excited to be a part of the school community or to go to class. Is that something that you have sensed? And I guess what I'm leaning for you guys is, what are ways students could help attack that apathetic nature or feeling that schools may be experiencing right now, or students may be experiencing right now?
I actually want to talk about that a little bit. We just had a meeting at my school about that, and it related almost to school pride. And it was with a program we have here in my county called Grad Nation. It helps our schools increase their graduation rate. Something that we saw among our student population is that they really don't feel connected to the school. And there's a lot of our schools in our county that are experiencing that right now. The solution, and this was a panel of like 15 students, the solution we came to is really, we need to start encouraging our students to participate in the school community, however way that may be. If that means having after school activities, including community service. One of the options too we opened up is highlight your school's history and show your students why they should be proud to come to school, so that they continue into that education and that mind of, okay, I'm coming to school to hopefully be someone like my school's alumni, going to college, starting a business, and having a school named after you. So that's really what I mean.
We lost Jorge for a second.
Sorry, my mom was COVID, so she got a call from the school, but I'll continue with my comment of,
No worries.
it's
Or do not edit that out. I want the fact that mom interrupted the conversation to stay on record. Keep moving.
yeah, and see, that's something too, like you have to balance family time out and everything. But going back to the original comment, school pride is so important for our students to be involved. We recommended having like school merch for the students, and yeah, I know, I think Mary Katherine and Jenaya could add more to that.
Jenaya, Mary Katherine, who wants to hop out there with some ideas of how do we tackle this challenge that is everywhere of student apathy?
Yeah. So this is one that I think is really interesting. There are a lot of stuff out there that shows that someone's going to care more about something if it directly impacts them. If something is going to change how they view something or what happens to them, they're going to take a stand on it a lot stronger than they would if it didn't even directly affect them. So I think one of the ways we can combat this student apathy is we push how they do high school will affect what happens afterwards. I think we need to open their eyes to all of the opportunities that they have. We've got, like, I know for our school, We've got community colleges, we've got universities, we have entrepreneurs, we have trades you can do that you don't even have to go to school for. Like, there are so many things, and I think kids get lost in the fact that, like, can't wait to get out of high school, I just don't want to do it anymore. They lose sight of, like, what are you gonna do afterwards? And they don't see themselves doing anything like that interests them. They don't have a motivation to go out and achieve anything. And I think so if we push that, the sky's the limit and there are so many opportunities, and introduce them to all of these different fields and things that they can do after high school, now it directly affects them. What they want to do. If they want to go to college, they're going to have to make their grades good. Or if they want to do an internship, or if they want to do an apprenticeship, like, now what they do in high school directly affects their future, and it's a future that they care about. So I think once we invest them in, what comes after, I think that's how we get them to empathize with school.
I absolutely agree with Jenaya. I think that was very well said. I've never thought of it. I've never thought of, like cultivating what happens next and making that like an incentive to go to school. But I think that's a great point of view. I'll say in my school, one thing that we really focus on is doing different activities to cultivate a school culture. And I think it really starts from the top. When I went into my school is very new. It's like derived from the collaboration between a local community college and our school district. So I think I was like the third class to go through. And one thing that all of the students were able to do is, it's a brand new school. So we were able to pick the name, pick the mascot, pick the school colors, name the mascot. So I think that allowing students to take ownership of some part of their school, maybe allowing them to create a new club and leave it there, or like a park bench. Maybe they did a fundraiser and that's what they left. That's what class of 20 whatever left. I think that creates pride as well, and makes you want to do better because it's yours. Like, you have ownership over that part of it. And so I think that all three of us had great options. And I'm really interested in what Jenaya said.
Yeah. So I'm curious, do your schools give you much voice to solve problems like this, or do they generally try to solve it from the teacher lens? And then my follow-up question to that is, do you think schools should give more ownership to students to solve real challenges that the schools are facing?
I think absolutely. I think that at a school, the average high school is what, like 500 students, 500, 800, maybe I'm off a little bit, but with that many students in one place, I think that we should absolutely be able to call ownership to at least something. I think that only makes sense, right? And so I think that some high schools do a better job of giving students the opportunity. I think some high schools, are kind of a bit more strict on it, but I think that teachers and administrators will see the difference in months. And I can attribute to that personally because, like I said before, with my school, we created it from the bottom up. And I think that just doing that from the beginning, starting an expectation of students coming in and saying, I have ownership over this. I have the responsibility to make this what it is. And if I don't, then it's not going to be something that I am happy to go to every day. And so I am really, really an advocate for letting students, number one, training students in leadership skills so that they will be able to handle that responsibility. And number two, giving it over to them and trusting them with that responsibility.
Awesome. Jorge, hop out there?
Yeah. And I don't know if I heard Mary Katherine right or wrong. 500 to 800 students per high school or per class? Because per high school, at least mine, is like 1,200 students.
I know.
The biggest high school in my county is like 3,000 students.
Yep.
So I can understand the frustration of some administrators of, how am I going to give 3,000 students a voice?
Yep.
And some of them, you might even think, well, they don't even know the school's history. They don't know what we're doing. So it's not going to be productive. But end of the day, as administrators, you don't really see what your students are doing. So who best to ask about what's going on is your school culture and your school environment than the students. I mean, the teachers are only there for part of the day, and they don't they don't get to interact with the actual students that much apart from the instructional curriculum time. At Jefferson, the high school that I go to, what we do is we have various clubs. We have the student council. We have another one, it's like the principal's advisory board. It's a group of students and they tell the principal what's going on. We used to have one called the leadership development team, and those were a group of students from different school clubs that came together to make the school better. We have we have something called the ICC. It's like the interclub council, and it's all the club presidents at the school working to give administration ideas about what they can do to make clubs more successful and in turn the school more successful. So you just have to find like ideas like that where you can pull from different areas of the school and still give everyone a voice, but just in a smaller form. Another school in Osceola here in Florida, what they do is they actually do town halls during the year. So they have 4 town halls. One is at the beginning of the year where students actually get to have a chance to set the school rules. So administration will go, and this kind of like relates to what Mayor Katherine said, give students a choice. The administration will go into this meeting and tell them, okay, here are these set rules. Here's what we expect from you. And then the students in turn get to tell administration, what do you expect from us? And then they continue with that. The second one sets more of their expectations. The third one is a reflection. And then the fourth one is just kind of like a goodbye party. Hopefully everything worked out.
Hopefully. Jenaya, do you want to add anything to that?
I think Mary Catherine and Jorge are right on point. I think student voice, a lot of our students, some of them, they just don't really care. The apathy we were talking about earlier, and I think a lot of it's because people, administrators, teachers, staff, really set in their ways. This is how I've always done it. It works moderately well. Let's just keep doing it this way. And that way they hold all the cards. And I think because we've been like this the whole time, a lot of our students think, well, it's never going to happen. So why, and even if we do speak up, what's really going to change? And I think so that there's that point where it's kind of like, giving them that voice maybe shows them that, yeah, you can speak up. Yeah, your voice does matter. It is important. But it's also really important for, districts and administration and staff to hear them and implement, because you can't just speak to a brick wall.
Yeah, it sounds like what you're saying is oftentimes schools can be built to create comfortable environments for the educators, the teachers, versus trying to think about it through the student's lens of how do we constantly have a growth mindset to do this better, to connect with our most important constituent, which is our students, not the comfort of our staff. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
I want to add one last comment to what Jenaya was saying. It just popped into my head. It's not also just about the students, but it's also about what the teachers themselves are reflecting. Like your school might have a really good student community. They're all involved. They all know each other. But if you go into a classroom and the teacher's just like strict, no bending of the rules, even if it's just a little bit in policy, like if someone needs late work turned in, something's going on at home, but they're dead set on no, that's my expectation, and they're like strict about it. And like Jenaya said, they're not willing to compromise or change their views just a little bit. Your students are not going to start liking your school, and they're more than likely just going to be like, well, why am I doing this? Why am I even coming? Like, am I even learning anything by just sitting there and listening to a grumpy person all day? That's something that we have to think about too.
Yeah, it's got to be from, you talked earlier about kind of a town hall message of like, yes, this is what we're about. We're receiving voice and choice. Like we're giving students voice and choice, but that can't just stop there. That has to go all the way down to each individual classroom so that students know this is what this school is about, not just this is an event we're trying to do to get some feedback. We're actually trying to live this out differently. Is that right? So one last question I have for you just about schools itself, and then we can dive into personal questions for each of you. It sounds like, the schools that you guys want to be a part of to fight apathy, to fight cliques, are ones where students have more voice and choice in what's happening and what they can explore. It sounds like you guys want to continue to explore identity and to continue to develop stronger community with each other. One question I have as I think about, as a former high school teacher myself, what is the importance of the school's job, I guess, in helping prepare you for the future? Meaning, specifically in this case, leadership skills. How important is it for your high school to help develop your leadership skills?
I think leadership, people think leadership, they think of like someone holding a position in leadership. I think that's probably the most broad knowledge when we think about leadership. And I think it's the school's job to break that down for us. Leadership is inspiring others. Leadership is standing up for your peers, even if you don't really know that person. Leadership is taking on responsibility and being honest and delivering things on time when you say you will, holding yourself to your own word. Leadership is so many moving parts, so many different things. And I think those get lost and maybe are even covered up with this myth of what leadership really is. So I think we want to take a page from Mythbusters maybe and just kind of like, bust the myth that leadership is just a role that you hold or a position. Leadership is something you take on. I think, true leadership is a choice. It's not any position or role that you're given.
That's awesome. Mary Catherine, you want to add to that?
Yes. I think that the point Jenaya took by saying, or by starting with leadership isn't a position, it's, just something that you do. I think that's really important. I think that every school should start there. I think that maybe more so than positioning or responsibilities pertaining to other people, I think that schools would do well to start with leadership of self. Start with, like we mentioned before, time management, planning, truthfulness, simple things that you think people would know, but you can't assume that every person is taught that. You can't assume that every person has that foundation. And I think that in high school, as a preparation to go out into, like they say, the real world, I think that our schools should definitely take that on as something just as important as our core curriculum.
Great. Jorge, do you want to add anything before I start peppering you guys with individual questions?
Yeah, I do. I have one last thing, and it was the first thing I was going to say when I got the chance. If we are not doing it in the schools, where are we doing it? I want to say that we're doing it at home, but do we really have the connections at home in our households to actually develop our students' leadership? I'm very passionate about this. I'm a state president for a CTSO, FCCLA, and I'm always trying to encourage school administrators to get CTSOs inside of their schools. DECA, FCCLA, FBLA, there's FFA. Get something that your students can, one, join for school pride in that, but two, that they get an opportunity to compete in the programs, participate in the programs, feel supported in what they want to do and what they're passionate about, but also develop their leadership skills, their communication skills, that they gain those connections that they need for the next steps of life. I think this type of work, I'm only here doing this stuff with Franklin Covey because of FCCLA. I was recommended by national staff for the Reality and Talks workshop, the podcast. I'm getting a little nervous. And even now, still doing this, I get nervous sometimes. But if it wasn't for organizations like DECA and FCCLA and even Franklin Covey that give me these leadership opportunities, I'd be stuck at my school just doing the little things that maybe aren't preparing me as well as a bigger club or organization could.
Yeah, I think that's a really good bookend to bring into leadership, because I think leadership is still a position. You still get to grow in it. But Jenaya, I think the sad thing for me, it probably took me 20 years or 30 years to really understand that leadership's not a position, it's a choice, right? And every day we have opportunities to live and live an example and leave a legacy for folks to be better leaders and to live different lives. And so I do think what you started with there is that, school's job is to help break that mold down so that everybody can look in the mirror and see that they are a leader that can help improve the school community, their family community, or their actual like neighborhood community they live in. So I appreciate that very much. So to wrap up the podcast, I ask every guest we have the same questions. And so I'm going to do a rapid fire round and I'll call your name out and just answer as quickly as possible. My first question is, what daily or weekly habits or disciplines do you have in your life that you think help you be the best version of yourself or the most successful version of yourself? Mary Katherine, I'm going to start with you.
Waking up early in the morning. I think that whatever early is for you, pushing that, expanding your day, giving yourself more time is one of the best life-changing tips that you can have.
What do you do with that time when you get up early? Is there anything specific that you do on a regular basis?
So for me personally, I mentioned earlier in the podcast that I have a really strong faith that kind of settles me and everything. So what I do in the morning is I explore that by reading my Bible, praying, different things like that. But just, I think I just really like seeing the sunrise for some reason. I don't know why. I think that it gives me some type of boost to say I was up before the sun, right? Yep. I just think that those extra hours added to my day are really important.
That's awesome. Jorge, what about you?
If you're tired, if you're not feeling it, go take a nap. I can't stress it enough. I don't function well if I haven't taken a nap and I'm feeling tired.
Yep.
I'd rather spend 30, 40 minutes sleeping than 30, 40 minutes sitting at my computer. Okay, what am I doing? And then I'm just sitting there staring off. And then later on, I'm just like, I'm so tired. I'm going to go. You've already wasted 2 hours trying to figure out what you wanted to do because you were tired. Then if you just made the investment, took the risk and went to sleep for 30, 40 minutes. That's, I think, one of the biggest tips I can give people. Because
sorry to cut you off. That's something I didn't learn till college, I don't think, because, in high school, you've got so much of a structured day. In college, when it's less structured, you're like, oh, I can take a nap right now and I will be better if I study. So it's cool to hear someone in high school already recognize that. Jenaya, what about you? What discipline or habit do you have?
I think for me, I just keeping track of all of your assignments, your deadlines. It helps keep me like structured, like you talking about, so that I know when things are due. I'm never second guessing if I have homework, as well as the fact, like, it's really important. Your grades are important. Getting your stuff in on time is important, but also your own like individual health is important too. So taking time to relax, taking time to do things that make you happy, fill up your cup. If you keep taking and taking and taking, you don't pour anything back, you're gonna run out of steam. And when that happens, you're gonna lose all the motivation to do things you need to do. So I think if you, like Jorge was saying, make the investment, like, invest in yourself, and then you won't have to be hurting later.
That's awesome. All right, quick question. This is just a rapid fire on this one. Either your favorite book, podcast, and I know you're all rushed to say mine, but don't say mine. That's a terrible joke. Hopefully you guys are on mute so I can tell you're laughing. But all kidding aside, favorite book, favorite podcast, favorite, even, Jorge said TikTok earlier, so TikTok channel, YouTube channel, whatever that you go to most regularly to improve yourself as a leader and as a person. So I'm curious, what is that for you? Again, it could be a book, periodical, something that is just there that recharges you. So Jorge, I'll start with you.
TikTok or YouTube? I wish I could say I had time to sit down and read. I still have a book that Franklin Covey sent me called Unconscious Bias. I really had my mindset on starting it. I don't have time. And the TikToks that are like 2-3 minutes and the TED videos that I see on YouTube that are like 5 minutes, oddly enough, like those videos give me so much more knowledge, and they give me like random little facts that then I'm like, wait, let me look that up. And that leads to a new thing. That leads to another new thing. And I really like to challenge that convention of you can only learn if you're learning from books. TikTok and Instagram, they have pages for everything. There's Canva help, there's science, there's math. Once you just start getting into like your little click on those sites, the algorithm figures out what you like and it'll start recommending things that you want to learn about.
Oh, I do agree. When we started this podcast, I was like, all right, I got to dive into social media. Not figured out how to use it, but gone on some rabbit trails into TikTok, and I have learned so much that way. That's why I asked, like, where do you learn? It doesn't have to be a book, but I've got a few books as I'm looking up here at the time reading. Mary Katherine, how about you?
I'm like Jorge now. I love a good TED Ed video. Oh my goodness, there's a TED Ed for everything. I think that I learn a lot from books, but I'm really into fiction. Like right now, I'm reading A Tale of Two Cities, and it's something that I've wanted to read forever, but I'm just now getting into it. But I love Dickens. I love Hemingway. I'm a classics person, and I think that there's a lot of knowledge. There's a lot of expansion of ideas, even just expansion of like reading different words you don't see every day. So I love a good classic.
That's awesome. All right, Jenaya, giving you time.
All right. So for me, like Mary Katherine was talking about, love to read. I'll read on my phone. I have like 5 or 6 different reading apps on my phone. I've got a whole library above me and in the back over here, as you can see. So mostly it's like romance books, some romance stuff, I guess. It's my thing. So that's kind of what I do. But like, even though a lot of it's fiction, not really a lot of nonfiction, there are still so many different themes, so many different things that you can learn from that kind of stuff. Like, I don't think anything I have is really for nothing. There's always something in there where you're like, whoa, like, I never thought about it that way. There's a different way of thinking about things. There's a different way of viewing things. And I always like to see that, as well as like just think about, oh, like, what if I didn't view it as, black and white? What if a little bit of what was gray, So I think that's kind of like what's really cool about what you can find in those books.
Well, I love that both of you reading fiction, because I feel like that I've never read enough fiction, maybe a little bit in high school, but once I got to college, studying subjects, or even after college, I'm looking up most of these books up here, or some sort of academic book or improvement of some sort. And I've got this like library above here. We've been back here. Like, I wish, and my wife, who's a former reading teacher, constantly is trying to get me to read more fiction. So I cannot encourage you guys enough to keep going down that path. I can't necessarily endorse the romance novels, Jenaya, but I love that people have their own thing. So just keep riding it out. All right, last question. You guys are amazing, by the way. Last question. I'm gonna start with you, Jorge. I'll go to Mary Katherine. I'll end with you, Jenaya. Jorge, what is the best piece of leadership advice you've come across recently? So just our life advice, whatever you want to go. So it could have been something you scrolled on TikTok, or a quote that you're trying to memorize right now, or a TEDx you just saw. Jorge, you're first.
Take things one step at a time. Things are bound to happen, but you can't rush them. Something we talked about in science class is entropy, and it's the likeliness of life to really just want to be disordered. Whatever you're doing in leadership and life, just take everything one step at a time. Focus on the small things, but always have an end goal in mind. Just don't get overwhelmed by it.
That's awesome. Appreciate it. Mary Katherine, how about you?
I heard someone say one time on a podcast, they say, in order to be great, you have to be consistently good. And I think that's important, because a lot of times we focus on the big outward showings of how great we are, but just the everyday thing that we do that's good, if you do it long enough, it'll turn into great. So that's just something that I love.
All right, Jenaya, no pressure. You're the last person I'm calling on for this podcast. Knock it out of the park.
So I think for me, like, one of the biggest things is that, things happen for a reason. So if something you really, really wanted didn't happen, like, I guarantee you it's for a reason. And that's what always helps me get back up. Because whenever you fall down, whenever things don't go your way, you always got to get back up. Because the second you don't, the second you give up, is when you truly lose. So, I mean, you never really lose anything until you quit. So for me, that's what always helps me when things don't go my way, or, that didn't happen the way that I wanted it to. Just getting back up and getting the motivation to keep going and keep improving and moving forward. That's probably the best advice that I have.
That's awesome. Well, this may sound corny, given that I'm hosting a podcast for one of the worldwide premier leadership organizations, but just the 3 quick answers that you guys gave, I want you to know are giving me life. They're all speaking to me differently. And one thing I want to encourage you is just to remind me, like, man, I need you guys on repeat for a little bit, because sometimes you just get in funks. You got to have friends around you to hold you accountable for what you're saying now. Because some days, Jenaya, like as life goes on, you're going to think, yeah, everything happens for a reason, but man, I really wanted to get into that college, or I really wanted that job, or I really wanted, and you may be in a funk longer than you're normally used to. And so it's just refreshing to have people around you with that kind of perspective. So personally, I just want to thank you all for sharing your wisdom with me. Professionally, I would like to say thank you all for coming here, bringing your whole head and heart to this interview. This has been awesome. It's really, really been awesome. And I'm going to make sure that, again, like I told you earlier, my 8-year-old son loves to watch this on YouTube. So I'm going to make sure he is watching this with me and we can talk about it. I appreciate what each of you are doing. I appreciate how each of you are trying to live differently to inspire others. And I appreciate that each of you are trying to lead differently to inspire others. So thank you for making time for us. Thank you for, like I said, bringing your whole head and heart. This has been a real blessing. Thank you very much. Please support us by subscribing to our YouTube channel, podcast on Apple or Spotify, and help us celebrate the beautiful, messy work of shaping human potential.